How do you tell your kids about the history and tradition of Tennessee football?
Conrad handoff, left side, Vols gets to the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Give him 6. Touchdown!
How do you explain the 59 upset of LSU?
Hands it to Cannon. Cannon on the right side. A hole starts to open. Schaefer trips him. Wayne Grubb, Charlie Severance, and Bill Baker's trying to get to stop him at the 1-inch line.
It's all there on 100 Years of Volunteers from UTV Home Video. 2.5 hours of the big plays, the big games, the great players and coaches of Tennessee football.
Still be the best coach like he was then because he understood football and what it took to win.
100 Years of Volunteers relives the stunning kickoff return by McEver against Alabama, Johnny Butler's famous touchdown run, and much, much more. 100 Years of Volunteers, only on Home Video.
The pitch to Morgan. Morgan at the corner. Fight. Give him 6. Touchdown, Tennessee. Moore pulling the ball down at the 3. Moore to the 5, to the 10, to the 15, to the 20, to the 25, to the 30, to the 35, to the 40, to the 45, to the 50, to the 45, to the 40, to the 35, to the 30, to the 25, to the 20. Give him 6 points. Touchdown, Tennessee, on a kickoff return by Decatur, Tennessee's Gary Moore. Back to throw. He's going to throw a fly batter downfield, racing after the ball, handgun. Takes it at the 10, 5, yes, sir, 3. Touchdown, Big Orange. Kick is up. The kick is good. No, it is no good. It is no good. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 60 yards. Jeff Powell. Touchdown, Big Orange. Handoff tailback. Works left side. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give him 6. Hubert Simpson has 4. 4 touchdowns for Simpson. Testaverde in trouble, and Testaverde is going to be sacked. Testaverde is sacked. Morgan backing up, wants the ball, will make the catch, needs a block, gets one, 40, 45, 50. Will he go all the way? Yes, sir. 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Give him 6. Touchdown, Tennessee. 63-yard punt return by Stanley Morgan.
There's been one constant in Tennessee football history since 1968. John Ward and Bill Anderson have called games on the Vol Radio Network. And this is the walk they take every Saturday before a home game to the Vol Radio Network booth, where they've called the action of so many great games and so many great players in UT history.
And now, as Tennessee comes onto the field, it's football time in Tennessee.
For John Ward, the appointment as play-by-play man on the Vol Radio Network had been a long time in the making. A Knoxville native, Ward attended the University of Tennessee for both his undergraduate and law degrees. Surprisingly enough, his start in broadcasting came while working as a newspaper reporter.
I worked at the Knoxville Journal, started as a copy boy, then they asked me to work in the sports department as a writer. I covered high school games. Probably I was the low man. I don't remember how many we had on the staff. The low man, so I did high school games. And the high school games in those days were broadcast. And it so happened that the manager of the radio station was the son of the editor of the newspaper. And so he came down. This is the way it happened. He came down. I had done fraternity games at school, at the university, just make-up games on tape, just playing games, you know, whatever. So I'd had a little exposure to it. So he came down to the sports department. He said, our sports announcer has a job, and he left town. We've got this game sold tonight. Who can we have to broadcast the game? I said, well, I'm covering the game for the Journal. I'll just broadcast it. It's exactly what I said. I thought he was kidding. Got to the game, and they, you know, radio people get there an hour before. Newspaper people get there 5 minutes before the game. I got there 5 minutes before the game, and the engineer, you're supposed to broadcast the game. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. Guy Smith said you're supposed to broadcast the game. So I broadcast the game. And then for about 2 years, I'd cover the game for the Journal and broadcast the game. That was basketball, but I did football as well. And I would come back and write the story after broadcasting the game on local radio. That's how I got started.
Ward would spend several years broadcasting high school football, but he focused most of his energies into the advertising business. He dabbled in broadcasting merely as a hobby. He began broadcasting UT basketball in 1965 and was selling advertising on the coaches' shows when athletics director Bob Woodruff called him in the spring of 1968.
Coach Woodruff called me and he said, we're going to have a new football announcer, but are you interested? I said, yes, I would be interested in that. And he said, would this interfere with your television, selling the television show for Coach Dickey? That's the first question he asked me, not whether I wanted to do the games. Will this interfere on selling the TV show for Coach Dickey? I said, no, it would help it. And so he said, okay, would you do the games? I said, yes. And that was in the spring, probably about, I don't remember the date, but it was not more than 2 or 3 weeks before the spring football game.
So John Ward became the 8th man to broadcast Tennessee football when the September opener rolled around with Georgia in 1968. But he would need a partner, a color commentator to join him in the Vol Network booth. There was no clear-cut choice. Several names were being thrown around, including that of former Vol wingback Bill Anderson. Anderson was a star at Tennessee from 1955 through 57. He was the team's co-captain during his senior year. After he left Tennessee, Anderson joined the Washington Redskins, where he made that NFL team with a little help from a fellow UT grad, Doug Atkins.
Of course, everybody knows who Big Doug is, and at that time, he pretty well ruled the roost in the NFL. No one could handle him, and he ran over everybody, and that he wanted to at least. And I weighed about 195 pounds, and they had me playing offensive end in an unbalanced line, and when they go the other direction, that put me to block him, which was almost impossible. So the first play, we got down to the last game, and they were going to make the final cut, and there wasn't but 2 or 3 rookies left, and so they started me to see what, give me a good test, I guess. And first play, we lined up. Fortunately, it went out the other side, and I didn't have to do much. I came back by Doug, and I told him, I said, look, I'm trying to make this football team. You leave me alone. He says, well, don't worry, rookie, I'll take care of you, because I'd known him before while I was in school playing here. And he did. I'd block him, he'd fall down, and he'd lay there and say, well, how's that? You think that'll look all right? And that kind of thing. And in the meantime, when Don Bowl, a big tackle we had, about a 7-year veteran there, would try to block him, well, he just ran all over him. It just knocked him sideways. And so I caught a few passes and so forth and made the team, made the cut. So the next Monday morning, we had the meeting there and started watching the film before Coach Kaharick, Joe Kaharick was the coach at the Redskins then, and before they turned on the film, he just jumped all over Don Bowl. I mean, just chewed him out something fierce. You don't block him all day. You can't block Atkins, and you're 280 pounds, or you stink. He said, I'm going to turn the film on you, and you watch a 190-pound rookie block Doug Atkins. And it looked great. Doug was going down. And so when the film was over, of course, Don Bo kept looking over there at me. When the film was over, I went to get dressed, and he come over there and just grabbed me by the arm, jerked me right up out of my seat. He said, "There's no way you can block Doug Atkins. There's a deal going on. You two guys are from Tennessee. There had to be a deal." And I said, "No, I tell you, the secret to blocking Doug Atkins is you just got to get to him quick."
Anderson spent 6 years with the Washington Redskins, retiring in 1964. He came back to Tennessee and joined Doug Dickey's first coaching staff with the Volunteers. He coached the ends for 1 year and then realized the coaching profession simply wasn't for him. Bill Anderson returned to the NFL and was traded from the Washington Redskins to the Green Bay Packers. In his final year, 1966, he played with Vince Lombardi's great team that beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl I.
Not everybody has that opportunity. I was very fortunate. You know, I got traded there, and I hope I contributed a little bit to it, but there were great football players there, and along with the coaches and the organization, and everything was outstanding, and that was a very good experience for me.
After playing in Super Bowl I, Bill Anderson finally did retire from the NFL and returned back to Knoxville, this time to go into business. When Bill returned to Knoxville in 1968, the University of Tennessee was still looking for a partner for John Ward in the Vol Network booth.
My first thought was to get a professional announcer. So we talked to some people about that. We talked to 2 and maybe 3 other former football players. Bill was a close friend of Coach Dickey because he had coached for him. And Coach Dickey had great respect for his ability. And so it sort of just wandered, and Bill will say that it just happened. It just sort of happened. Finally, Woodruff said, "Who have you picked?" And this would be like a month before the season. "Who did you pick?" And I said, "I didn't know I was supposed to pick." And he said, "Well, who have you decided on?" And so Coach Dickey was in the meeting, and he said, "Well, what about Bill Anderson? Let's just go with Bill Anderson." I said, "That's fine with me. Let's get Bill Anderson." In essence, what I said was, let's get somebody. And so we got Bill Anderson.
How I got involved with the Vol Network is a short story, but it happened. Woodruff made it happen. Coach Woodruff, I think. He called and asked me if I'd like to be interested in doing it. And I said, "Well, I don't know. I've never thought about it." Just out of the blue, I got the phone call, and he said, "Well, we've got a couple other fellas that I've been talking to. I just wondered if you'd be interested." And I said, "Well, I don't know. Let me think about it." So I thought about it, and I never heard any more from him. And I had made up my mind. I didn't want to get involved in that. I didn't think I had time and so forth. And next thing I knew, it came out in the paper that John and I were doing it. So, you know, that's the way it happens. So I told him I'd take a shot at it and see what happened, and it's been going on for a long time.
This is John Ward and Bill Anderson's vantage point high above Shields-Watkins Field. This is the spot where they've made so many memorable calls in Tennessee football history. John and Bill are celebrating their 25th year on the Vol Network, and so we thought it might be fun to let them reflect back on some of their favorite games down through the years, and a good place to start. The 1968 home opener, their first game against Georgia. The 1968 season opener with Georgia would bring a lot of firsts. Tennessee would suit up its first black player, receiver Lester McLean. Tennessee and Georgia played the first game ever on artificial turf in college football. And, of course, there was the new broadcast team, John Ward and Bill Anderson. How did those two get ready for the game? Well, they practiced in Bill Anderson's basement, calling the action of pro football games on TV with the sound turned down.
And I was very nervous about that. I think probably more so than going to play in the Super Bowl, really, because that's something I was on new territory. You know, it's not something I'd never done before, and so you don't know what's going to come out of it. And I wanted to try to do a decent job, but I didn't know what I was supposed to do, to be honest with you. So I just jumped in, and away we went.
We were prepared. We had worked hard. We had gotten to know each other, Bill and I. We had gotten to know the teams, the players, the background. Had a good staff, spotter, stat man, statistics man. That's really where it starts, as Bill would say. I mean, we keep the score, but the other people, you've been involved in that, so Bob Kessling knows that the people around us really feed us the information or give us the guidance to do the game. But as far as being, I wasn't nervous. I'm always tense. I wasn't nervous. And I wasn't nervous about Bill, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, Georgia was perfectly honest with Tennessee. The Bulldogs didn't want to play on the Volunteers' new tartan surface. As a matter of fact, Bulldog Athletic Director Joel Eaves even threatened to have his team boycott the game. But Georgia showed up, and it was a whale of a ball game. A 17-all tie that has never been forgotten.
They were favored, I believe, over Tennessee, and there's been a lot of controversy going on over the new surface on the football field and some other things, and so it was a big win or a big tie for Tennessee.
John, the game was basically a struggle for Tennessee all day long.
Tennessee got off early and played well. Tennessee, of course, was the defending SEC champion in 1968. They won in 1967, the SEC championship, but had lost the quarterback who had led them there. And Bubba White basically was playing quarterback, had a lot of experience. But anyway, Tennessee got up early, then got behind, and Georgia controlled the game. Tennessee really didn't do much offensively until the last drive. I do remember that it happened very quickly, and that I think it got Georgia a little out of sync in the fact that Tennessee, with a little time to go on their own 20-yard line, people said, well, you know, they're going to protect or whatever, the prevent deal, whatever. And Tennessee moved the ball right down and then went for the last touchdown, which was caught by Gary Chris, who was a Tennessee receiver. And then, how I remember, the extra point, they said, well, they got to go for two. They're down 17-15. Got to go for two. And it just happened. I'm sure they called the play. I'm sure they huddled and all that. But it just happened. And then all of a sudden, here, the Ken DeLong, who was the younger brother of Steve DeLong, made the catch. And the game was over. And it was over. And it was 17-17. It was a very strange feeling. The game, all of the points, those last 8 points, scored after there was no time on the clock, which may have happened before. I don't remember. I'm sure it has, but I've never remembered that. Both scores after the game was over. Of course, the play got underway before the clock ended. Very unusual finish, and I'm sure people were excited, but I don't remember that. I remember only 17-17. Everybody left.
Will go to the tailback. Webb 10, Webb 5, Webb 4, 3, 2, 1. Give him a big touchdown. Chuck Webb, Tennessee.
Next on John and Bill's favorite list, we move forward 21 years to a night in Pasadena, California. This game would be significant for years to come. Tennessee, fresh off an unimpressive win against Colorado State, was taking on 6th-ranked UCLA at the Rose Bowl. The Volunteers went to the West Coast knowing they had some talent, particularly at running back in Reggie Cobb and Chuck Webb. But not much else was known about those Volunteers. Not much until Tennessee crushed the Bruins 24-6.
The whole team came of age at that game. Getting on the plane, coming back, you felt the chemistry had come together. That was the key game in this whole era, I think, from 89, 90, 91, no question. That was the key game. Well, the key play in the game, really, when in hindsight, would be that UCLA elected to go for first down on a 4th and short situation, and Tennessee stopped them. And I remember that Tennessee had a good contingent of fans. That's a big place. The Rose Bowl's a big place, obviously. Tennessee had a good, I don't know how many, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 probably, and they were down to our left. And they were noisy, and the UCLA crowd was not that into it, really. So the Tennessee fans, with that defensive stop, with that stop on the 4th down, the fans just got into the game and sort of, to me, set the tempo, the tenor of the game from that moment on. And I sort of got the feeling UCLA fans were looking like this and say, I can't believe how much noise is coming from this little number of people. And I think that translated out to the players. And Tennessee then went and won the game, and really in decisive fashion, to be honest with you. Tennessee beat them badly.
Yes, no question. Big day. Chuck Webb, he right away, what a day he had. Cobb had a good day too, but Chuck Webb, what, over 100 yards, wasn't it? Something like that. He ran for 134 yards against a good defensive football team.
It was a great night at the Rose Bowl, a special night for the Big Orange and their fans. A moment at the game's end signified the magnitude of this Tennessee victory.
As the fans and the players down to our left are cheering each other. What a moving moment this one is. Bill Anderson, the fans get the acknowledgement they should receive. They stayed behind this team.
Never forget it. Never absolutely forget it. Whether it was planned or not, I don't know. The feeling I had when the players came out and jumped up over the retaining wall, shaking hands with the fans, to me that was totally spontaneous by the players and by the fans. The players had interpreted the response of the fans, small in number in a 103,000-seat stadium, but loud and involved and committed. And they felt it. No question, they felt it. And I think they rode on top of that. And at the end of the game, their first thought, I'm sure, was to say, we have won, and have the team response as a team. And then almost all of them said, the fans did this. And they turned and just ran down. I'll never forget that moment. Never forget that moment.
In 1971, unbeaten Penn State traveled to Knoxville for a season-ending game of the Volunteers. The highly favored Nittany Lions boasted a talented tandem at running back in future NFL greats Lionel Mitchell and Franco Harris. But Tennessee countered with a superb defense, a big play defense, led that day by Bobby Majors.
The Majors family came back for a reunion with Tennessee fans and were introduced, all of the Majors family, with the exception, of course, of the late Bill Majors, who had been so much a part of Tennessee football over the years. And I remember that. And I also remember that Bobby Majors, who was a defensive player but a very offensive player too. He's still a little offensive. But anyway, he was a great defensive football player in runbacks. Just had that knack. Just had that knack. And so the opening kickoff, Tennessee said, well, there's no way we can beat Penn State. No way. What happened? He brought the kickoff back, and that absolutely flipped it. And all of a sudden, Tennessee, from then on, made big play after big play. Lack of concentration, I'm sure, by Penn State. Conrad Graham recovered a fumble in midair, went a mile and a half for a touchdown. Majors punt returns. Jackie Walker returns interception. Just Tennessee absolutely blasted Penn State.
The whole defensive setup, the defense won the game. That was basically it. And Majors, Bobby had, as John said, an outstanding day. But you know, talking about him being an offensive player, I thought it was a big day. He's got his family there and everything, and what a day he had for himself. But I've been associated with all, well, not with all of them, but with three of the Majors players, of course, John and Bill and Bob. And they may not have been the greatest athletes in the world as far as speed and that type of thing, but all three of those boys had a great feel and a knack for making the right move and doing the right thing in football. And I think that's what's made them outstanding players, that they just not necessarily can jump the highest or throw the ball the furthest or that type of thing, but that was kind of bred in them, I suppose, or at least they were in a football family growing up, and they had a great feel for the game. And Majors, what a day he had that day.
Penn State was scheduled to play Tennessee in Knoxville again in 1972, but the Nittany Lions were reluctant to come back due to the heat. So athletics director Bob Woodruff went to work on a deal to bring Penn State back in 1972. To do so, he had to have lights for Neyland Stadium, so he went to work on UT president Ed Bowling.
The president of the university at that time was Dr. Ed Bowling, and he and athletics director Woodruff went to a meeting somewhere. I don't really know where it was. It might have been an NCAA meeting. My recollection is it was in Philadelphia. That may be wrong. Anyway, Woodruff made the arrangements for their travel. So they went to the meeting, and then they went back to the hotel. And Dr. Bowling's told me this story. So normally they would have separate rooms, right? President, athletic director. They checked in, and they were in the same room. Woodruff had put them in the same room. Well, of course, he could say, we've got to save money and everything, which he did. But that wasn't the reason. They got to the room, and so Dr. Bowling said, well, surely we can have a separate room. I'll just authorize we can do that. Woodruff got on the phone. He was talking to the athletic director at Penn State, whose name escapes me. I think it was Chekhov, but I may be wrong. Anyway, and Woodruff was on the phone, and Dr. Bowling said, we've got to get another room. Just a minute, I'm talking to the athletic director at Penn State. Yeah, we can play the first game. I think we can get it on TV. If we have lights, I'm sure we can get it on TV if it's a night game. And Dr. Bowling and Woodruff is carrying on this conversation. And so Woodruff said, just a minute. And Dr. Bowling says, we got to make arrangements, get off the phone and get me another room. And Woodruff says, Penn State will come to Tennessee again next year for the opening game if we have lights and can play them at night on TV. Get the other room. Can we have lights on TV and we can be on TV? Yeah, we can have lights. And so Tennessee put up the lights. And so Penn State played Tennessee both years in Knoxville. Now tell me anybody else can pull that deal. Huh?
So Woodruff got the lights for Neyland Stadium. It was the first night game in Tennessee football history, and the Volunteers beat Penn State 28-21. John and Bill have had the opportunity to watch so many great players from their vantage point here high atop Neyland Stadium. But there's one player that kind of stands out, a magic name, Conrad Holloway. And his star was shining bright in the 1974 UCLA game.
No question about it. Bill and I were not broadcasting the 1965 game, and we're talking about our favorite game. So the 65 game would have to stick out as the great Tennessee-UCLA game. But during the past quarter century, this game is remembered because of Conrad Holloway's return. I don't really think it was orchestrated, although some people might say it was. But he was injured. Tennessee got up early. Then Conrad Holloway was injured. Went to the dressing room, probably had x-rays, might have even gone to the hospital for x-rays, I'm not sure. Came back third quarter and walked around the north end of the field to come to the west sideline where Tennessee was, because the game was in progress. He just couldn't run across the field. And the moment he came, wearing number 7, people, you could just, it wasn't a wave, that may be where the wave started, because the crowd just rode him right around the field and it came to the bench. Tennessee was by that time behind. And Holloway, after 2 or 3 series, went back into the game, drove Tennessee down, and then came out around to the right side, went down to the end, fighting for the corner, dives in. Tennessee scored. Down 17-16. He's hurt. Have to take him out. Rather than go for 2, they go for 1 of the tie because Holloway's not available.
Bill, you remember the dive, the play?
Yeah, I can remember that pretty well, Bobby. He, as I mentioned earlier, I think he was an outstanding football player at Tennessee, and especially with the team that he had in front of him, his offensive team. There wasn't that many. It was not a strong team, and he had to carry the load pretty much by himself. So when he got hurt and went out in the peak, fans were certainly glad to see him coming back, you know, that he was able to go. And they expected him to score. When he goes back in there, they expected things to happen because he had a knack of making things happen. Big plays on his own, breaking loose and doing those things. And if they had had more players and more ability, I guess, on the offensive side of the ball, he probably wouldn't have done as many things as he did, but as the situation was, he had to do it. And as a result, he performed outstanding.
One game that stands out for John and Bill, the 1979 visit from Notre Dame. If you remember, in 1978, Tennessee went to South Bend, played well, but lost 31-14 to Notre Dame. So all of Big Orange country was rocking when the Irish came to town the following year.
The very fact that you're playing Notre Dame in Knoxville was a great moment. Notre Dame has no question, the greatest tradition in college football, and probably always will. They do it first class, and they've always done it that way. Anyway, Notre Dame comes to town. Tennessee people, how could Rutgers beat Tennessee? Homecoming game, by the way. But Tennessee might have been thinking past Rutgers. You always, I don't know whether you do that, Bill knows more about players. But anyway, Tennessee was ready, particularly Hubert Simpson, was ready for Notre Dame. They had a great team, a great individual running back in Vegas Ferguson, and so maybe Simpson was going to say, I'll show him. Tennessee stopped Ferguson just short of a touchdown, maybe. Anyway, he didn't score, didn't get any points on it, and Tennessee from that moment just took over the ball game, and Simpson went 100-some yards, I don't know how many.
Olszewski has his team of the eye formation this side. Handoff tailback, right, left side, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give him 6. Hubert Simpson has 4. 4 touchdowns for Simpson. Tennessee 39, Notre Dame 12.
Tremendous game and a great moment for Tennessee fans to beat Notre Dame in Knoxville. Made them forget Rutgers a little while.
Of course, Johnny had a difficult time, I think, when he came here. He struggled early on, and when he came here, I'm going to tell you, Tennessee was very short-handed as far as athletes are concerned. And so it was a difficult time, but that was a big win, and it seemed to maybe say, you know, this thing's starting to turn a little bit and go in the right direction.
In 1985, Auburn was the #1 team in college football when it came calling in Neyland Stadium. Tennessee that day was up to the challenge. Great defense by the Volunteers put the clamps on eventual Heisman Trophy winner Bo Jackson.
I think that's probably the only time in his life he got shut down cold, because he could make things happen. What a great athlete he was. And he just ran over people, great speed, power, and the whole 9 yards. Tennessee's defensive game plan was zeroed in on Jackson. I don't think there's any question about that, and they really punished him.
They hit him time after time after time, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And, you know, I think I've heard a lot of people criticize maybe Bo Jackson a little bit. I'm sure you've heard that he didn't want any more, that kind of thing. I don't think that's right. I think the coach probably did a smart thing by taking him out. He had really been punished, and it was obvious he wasn't going anywhere. And the game, Tennessee had it under control, and I think they probably took him out to keep him from getting hurt or something. I think it was a smart move myself.
The Tennessee offense was as impressive as the defense. Tony Robinson threw 4 touchdown passes and made big play after big play. Tennessee was on its way to a magical season.
Robinson sets his team in the I formation. Robinson fakes, play action, long pass down into the end zone. The man is there. Give him 6. Touchdown, Tennessee! Robinson throws. McGee catches. It was there all the way. McGee had him by 5 yards, and Robinson, Bill Anderson, right on the dollar mark.
Laid it up perfect, but the key to it all, he had time to stand in there. Good job of the offensive line, too, John.
Tennessee emerged in that game with a lot of people. Tony Robinson came in as quarterback and was very impressive. A lot of receivers played in the game. All in all, it was an outstanding performance by Tennessee, ready for the game. Maybe defense set the tone. I think Bill's right. The defense set the tone, but then the offense picked right up and just matured. And it was a very memorable game.
In 1970, Tennessee had a very good football team. Some have said maybe the best ever.
It's difficult to pick out best teams, I think. If you're going to compare that team with the teams we have today, they might get beat. But for their time, and I think it's one of Tennessee's better football teams.
That 1970 Tennessee team would go 11-1 under first-year coach Bill Battle, who happened to be an Alabama graduate. And when it was time for Tennessee and Alabama to meet, there were plenty of questions.
In those days, the university had a reception for the visiting team at the faculty club. And Coach Bryant, I don't know that head coaches came, probably most of the time they did, but for this particular game on Friday night, Coach Bryant came with his staff. And Bill Battle was there prior to that, and Coach Bryant came in, as Bill would, you know, a tremendous personality and just sort of because an aura around him. And I was standing next to Battle when they came up, and Coach Bryant came up and shook hands with Bill. They didn't say a thing about the game, but you know that's all they were thinking about. And Bill said, "How are you doing, Coach Bryant?" And Coach Bryant said, "How are you doing, Bill?" That was a very tense moment and a very memorable moment to me. You knew that Bryant wanted to kill Tennessee, and you knew that battle was maybe a little uncertain, but he wanted to win the game. Tennessee won 24-0. Dominated the game start to finish, no question about it. Dominated the game start to finish. Tennessee fans were totally uncertain about a young defensive secondary, particularly with this great list of passers, the greatest in the country. Hickson, as I remember, had been the #1 passer the previous year in the country. What's Tennessee going to do? New coach, new defense, everything else, untried secondary. And it all came to a head with 8 interceptions against Alabama, and they went on and set a school record with interceptions that year, 36, I believe, maybe 38 counting the game at the Sugar Bowl, which they don't count in the statistics. So Tennessee's play against Alabama was a big victory.
A little inside information now. There's some items that John has every single broadcast that are a necessity. First, his spotting board. He keeps all the players' news and notes about each team on these spotting boards during the game. Cough drops. He's used the same brand since 1968. He also has mouthwash to keep his throat loosened for every single game. And, of course, the biggest item, the famed blue towel he wears around his neck for each broadcast.
I wear a towel basically for therapeutic reasons. It is not a corny, I don't wear the towel because it's tradition. No, I do in a certain degree. But it's therapeutic. And the reason is that it started was we were playing it was a basketball game, 1967. Tennessee played at Mississippi State for the SEC basketball championship. 3 teams had come to the final night of the season with a chance to win the SEC championship. Florida, coached by Tommy Bartley, a good friend of mine, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee. If Tennessee won at Mississippi State, Tennessee would be the outright champion with a record of 15-3. The other teams would be 14-4. The game went triple overtime. It was played in an old gym, and our broadcast position was right back against the wall, and behind us was a window. And the window, though closed, had a draft. The wind was coming through, and it was getting to my throat. And in those days, I worked with the late Lowell Blanchard, and I told him as we went into the third overtime, I said, there's no way, my throat's gone. I can't make it. So he went down to the Tennessee bench and got a towel and brought it back and put it around like a scarf. And it warmed my throat. And I made it through the broadcast. And from that point on, I've always worn a towel, not to wear a towel, but because it keeps my throat loose.
If Tennessee would have lost the game, though, would you still be wearing the towel?
You're right. Never again.
John Ward has coined many phrases that are commonplace with Tennessee fans, like give 'em 6 and bottom. They'll live forever, even if John didn't plan them that way.
The phrases and so forth just happened. I don't really know. It was never planned. When I did high school games, I might have had phrases. I don't remember, to be perfectly honest with you. But I just did the games. But then when I started doing basketball and said bottom, I don't remember ever saying that, or why I ever said that, I don't know. Certainly I probably was copying from somebody else. Why it ever happened, I don't know. And the only reason it became a part of the game is because people played it back to me, not because I played it to them. When people came to me and said bottom, or there goes bottom, or he said bottom, then I said, well, they are relating to that. So I used it. And the same happened in football. When I said 5-4, I remember it was the first season, 1968. And the reason when I said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6, that's what I said. Why? Don't know. Wasn't planned, just happened. And Bill Anderson and I went to the Cotton Bowl, did not broadcast the game that year. It was on whatever radio. But we went together and sat in the stands, and somebody sitting in front of me in the Tennessee area of the Cotton Bowl said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6. And I looked at Bill, and Bill didn't remember that I had said that. But when that happened, I said, well, those people relate to that. That's how all phrases develop. Yeah, I don't sit around thinking up things. It's just what comes off, and then if people play it back, then, okay, they enjoy that, I'll use it.
It's been called the greatest comeback in Tennessee football history. A game and a day that will never be forgotten, not simply for how it happened, but where it happened. On November the 9th, 1991, Tennessee went to South Bend to play Notre Dame and found itself down 31-7 in the second quarter, and the Irish were getting ready to make it even worse.
Snap down. Kick is up. Blocked. Chasing after the ball. Who comes out of there with it? Tennessee will have possession. They're going to run with the football as it's picked away at the 25 to the 30, to the 35 to the 40, breaks to the outside to the 45 to the 50, to the 45 to the 40. Floyd Miley can fly. Floyd Miley has the ball at the 15, at the 10, at the 5. He has gone all the way. Touchdown, Big Orange.
I thought Tennessee could compete with Notre Dame going into the game. They had played very well against Notre Dame in Knoxville the year before. But the way the game went, Notre Dame totally dominated Tennessee early. And it was, I remember we would look at each other and sort of felt, no, what's going to happen here? 31-7 as was the score, and it was just going to be an absolute debacle from Tennessee's perspective. Then, at the end of the half, blocked field goal attempt, and Miley picks the ball up and goes. Gave a little heart, but really still 31-14. Notre Dame had dominated the game. They're going to win pretty easy.
Yeah, I think, well, it wasn't necessarily the score as much as it was the way they had dominated the game, because their running game, they were just powering over us, and we couldn't even seem to get them slowed down. They're picking up 8, 10 yards, 12, 15 a clip down the field, and it didn't look like there's much hope for getting that problem solved.
What changed it at halftime?
Well, I know what Tennessee did. They made up their mind they were going to stop the run, and they jumped everybody up on the line of scrimmage, everybody, and they went after the run. And be honest with you, Bob, again, I was surprised that Notre Dame didn't start throwing the ball, but they continued to try to run until late in the ball game. Then they finally realized they needed to throw the ball, and as soon as they started throwing it, boom, 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 they started moving the ball again. But I think they might have choked up a little bit, quite frankly, because they didn't. We threw everybody up on the line of scrimmage and went after the run, and they were determined they were going to run it down our throats, I guess, and they just wasn't able to do it.
And now Tennessee goes to the power I set, trailing 31-14. 7:05 to go in the third quarter. Tennessee, the handoff is fake. Kelly rolls left, looks to throw into the end zone. Give him 6. Touchdown, Von Reeves.
Tennessee began to move the ball consistently and used a lot of clock, but stayed in the game plan and then worked its way down to a chance to go ahead and ran, as I recall, a perfect play, a perfectly executed play, screen out to the left to Aaron Hayden. And as I recall, nobody touched him, maybe. I don't think anybody came close to it.
Notre Dame jumps into that 3-man defensive line, but here comes that safety blitz. Back to throw is Kelly. Kelly throws the ball full down at the 35, down to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, down to the 5, down to the 4, down to the 3, down to the 2, down to the end zone. Touchdown, Aaron Hayden, with a sensational call as Tennessee anticipates the blitz.
I almost saw it coming. I don't know football, but I almost saw it coming. And when he came out and I sort of followed him, I said, this is it. And it was. Nobody came close, as I remember.
Yeah, nobody touched him, I don't think. That was, John, that's another thing. I think that was the big difference in that they didn't panic. They're way down, and Coach Foreman with the offense, they hung in there with their game plan and just continued to pick away at it and didn't get desperate and start trying to get it all back in one shot. And as a result, it turned out for them.
With Tennessee leading 35-34 and just seconds remaining, it came down to Rob Leonard and a 26-yard field goal to win it for Notre Dame.
The Volunteers have no timeouts, neither does Notre Dame. 4 seconds remain in the game. Holding will be Sexton. Snapping will be Johnson. Attempting the field goal, it will be right at 27 yards. This will be Rob Leonard. The kick is up. The kick is good. No, it is no good. It is no good. It is no good.
I remember I said it's good. And then my first reaction was to look to Bill Anderson, who is to my left. At the Notre Dame game, the Tennessee's coaching box, where the coaches in the box call the plays, they were sitting right beside you, right beyond you. And the first thing I saw was not Bill Anderson, but I saw Philip Fulmer grab David Cutcliffe, put his arms around him. Then I looked back and said, the referee motioned wrong. No, I made the mistake, but the referee gave me the indication. But my first reaction was, Anderson, so close, Fulmer, Cutcliffe, Tennessee wins, and it was a great, great victory.
Well, in your defense, though, John, I'd have to say I thought the thing was good, too. I'll be honest. That was an unusual. Lincoln came across there. At first, I thought my first feeling was it's blocked. And then all of a sudden, late, the ball come out of there, and from the angle we were looking at it, I thought it went right through the middle. And I was as surprised as anybody.
Tennessee beats Notre Dame 35-34. The Volunteers go home victorious.
All the Tennessee-Alabama games are significant, but the 1982 game was special for all Tennessee fans because the Volunteers tried to break an 11-game losing streak to the tie.
The ball dressing room to the west sideline. The band is there. There are thousands of orange balloons as well. And now, as Tennessee comes onto the field, it's football time in Tennessee.
Tennessee had lost 11 straight games since the victory in 1970 and had come close a couple times, really, to winning in that. Keep in mind that during that period, however, Alabama didn't lose to many people in the Southeastern Conference. Tennessee wasn't the only team that wasn't beating Alabama as they won championship after championship. Anyway, they came to Knoxville, and people, I think, weren't confident at all. And sometimes when the fans are not confident and the team gets into the game, that's what makes it more memorable than if they're favored. And Tennessee was not favored.
Back to throw Cockrell. Cockrell looking. Cockrell's going to throw a bomb downfield to Willie Goff. This one will be touchdown! Big iron! Touchdown to Goff!
This game was remembered, I remember it as a great football game because Tennessee did come from behind, scored 22 straight points, executed well, great individual efforts by Coleman, by Cockrell, by the defensive unit from time to time. It was a high-scoring game.
Catching them, they have called plays that have popped open. The draw has been an extremely big play. Coleman not necessarily having all that much room to run in there, but he's done some running inside on his own, breaking some tackles and picking up some crucial first downs.
The ball's to the line. It will be for Tennessee first down and 10. Cockrell handoff, left side Coleman. Gets to the 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give him 6. Touchdown! Big Orange! The crowd tells you as Chuck Coleman pops it on the play that Bill Anderson just alluded to. But the big block was thrown by William Goff on the corner. And it was Chuck Coleman who goes 34 yards on a draw. And Tennessee leads Alabama by a score of 33-21 with 7 minutes and 21 seconds left to go in the football game.
But particularly at the end, it was a defensive play by Mike Terry. When Alabama got within 35-28, they were going for the touchdown. I know what people were saying. They're going to score. It's going to be 35-34. They're going to go for 2. They're going to make it. It's going to be 36-35, and it'll be 12 straight years. But Mike Terry went up into the air and intercepted the pass in the end zone at the end of the game, and Tennessee beat Alabama 35-28. Great moment. Great moment.
Back to throw is Lewis. Lewis looking, being pressured, pass down into the end zone. It is intercepted, Tennessee. Intercepted on the deflection by Mike Terry. 17 seconds to go, and Mike Terry intercepts the pass in the end zone on the deflection. And the crowd goes berserk.
Of course, anytime you play Alabama, you know, and you've had such a frustrating time, and then all of a sudden you do something you're certainly not expected to do and play an outstanding game. It really gives, you know, everybody's kind of maybe dumbfounded. You out there, well, you know, you don't know what's happened here. It's something you're surprised, but I don't recall doing anything other than I probably shut my mic off and yelled a little bit or something. But
Tennessee was not expected to win. The fans were there. They wanted, they hoped and everything, but, you know, it's going to happen again. And then Tennessee got behind, came back, really played well. Tennessee really played very well as a team in that football game. Played certainly better than they'd been playing that year. And then it got to the end with a chance, as I said, that Alabama to win. But Tennessee came up with the big play that fans had come to expect. Alabama would have the big play to turn the corner. No. Tennessee had the big play, and then everybody probably went and then exploded. And down came the goalpost and everything else in sight.
The seconds will tick down. There are now, ladies and gentlemen, 10 seconds to go. We're going to let you count it down as Tennessee will beat Alabama. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Final score, Tennessee 35, Alabama 28. Tennessee beats Alabama 35-28. Pandemonium reigns. The goalposts are history. The North goalpost, I think, has just been snapped. Anyway, it's been broken off, and students of the University of Tennessee are staring at the length of the field north to south. The fans are still here, standing and cheering. It has to be one of the great moments in Tennessee football history.
I'll never forget that Majors, I'm sure he was hauled out by his players. I don't remember that, but I do remember in my mind the picture of his leaning. Yes, he was on their shoulder. He leaned down, and Bryant was there to shake his hand. That happened to be Coach Bryant's final year against Tennessee. And they shook hands, and what they said, I don't know. John has probably told me that I don't remember. But that was a very memorable moment for me.
In reviewing John Ward and Bill Anderson's quarter century as Tennessee's football broadcasters, it was difficult for them to pick their 10 favorite games. But here's some other favorites. In 1973, 16-14 win over Kentucky, which saw Wildcat kicker Ron Steele fall short on a last-minute field goal attempt that would have won it for the Wildcats. Tennessee rallied for a 21-all tie with Vanderbilt in 1974. Larry Sievers made this dramatic two-point reception just seconds from the end of the game. Wins over Alabama in 1983, 84, and 85 all could have made it.
He pitches to the tailback. He's at the 40. He's at the 45. He's at the 50. He's at the 45. He's at the 40. He's at the 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Jonathan Jones. Johnny Jones, the punt for Tennessee. Tony Robinson, the quarterback. Tennessee trying for 2. Robinson with the ball. Give him 2. Tony Robinson keeps and sneaks. And the Volunteers miraculously have taken the lead over Alabama.
And, of course, the 16-14 Classic in 85, best remembered for this incredible Dale Jones interception.
Shula back to throw. Left-handed. Out into the flat. Broken up. Was that intercepted in midair? Ladies and gentlemen, what a play by Dale Jones. He was 2 feet away from Mike Shula, and as Shula released the ball, Dale Jones just reached out and picked it out of midair. An unbelievable interception.
There were many more games, and it was tough to pick them all, but picking the top game was easy. John and Bill both agreed that the Volunteers' 1986 Sugar Bowl win over Miami had to be their #1 thrill.
Yes, here's the blitz. Dickey in trouble. Skips out. Throws it all into the end zone. Give him 6. Touchdown! Jeff Smith! What a play by Darrell Dickey. As Dickey eluded a split, he stepped out to his right, and there, wide open, from Milan, Tennessee, Jeff Smith.
I had a feeling about that game when we went there that we were going to win. And I don't know why. Certainly wasn't anything logical that would tell you that. But just the whole atmosphere of everything, and I talked to Coach Majors, and he had indicated to me we're going after him. We're going to put some heat on the quarterback. And if they beat us, they beat us, but we're pulling out all stops.
Tennessee comes with an all-out blitz. Testaverde's in trouble, and Testaverde is going to be sacked. Testaverde is sacked.
Before the game, we were up there in the press box, and I went in back where the press goes to get a cold cup of coffee. And it was Keith Jackson, I think, was doing the color on television, and he was back there, and somebody introduced me to him, and I started talking. He's Tennessee. Yeah, well, how are they going to do? You know, I said, well, I think we'll be all right. And he says, well, I hope they can play well enough so that we don't lose our audience by halftime. And I said to him, we're going to beat them. And he looked at me like I was nuts. He said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, I felt we were going to beat them. And I don't know why, but we did. And it was a great football game.
The Vols in an I formation. Handoff Powell, left side, cuts back to the interior. He's at the 5, he's at the 4, he's at the 3, he's at the 2, he's at the 1. He is hit, he fumbles the ball. It has been recovered in the end zone, I think, by Tennessee.
It was the culmination of a long, long wait. Let's go to the Sugar Bowl as champions. And it had all come together. And my feeling was the fans just filled it. And it was just like a home game, except we were out of town, so we don't have to be too courteous. You know? Let it all go. And so the fans were on the road, but it was so that they had a different attitude. They were louder, more into it than they are at home games. So when they came out, yes, but I wasn't as confident as Bill. And I don't remember that we ever discussed that, what his expectation was. But and when they scored early, then my feeling was people said, well, it's been a great year. We've had a great trip. We're in the Sugar Bowl, so we get beat. Miami's a great football team. Then what happened after that? Tennessee wins 35-7. And that makes it the most memorable game that we have done. In my opinion, agreeing with Bill, that would be the #1 game.
Miami in a 4-man front. Give Powell, right side 40, 45-50, gets outside 45-40, 35-30, 25-20, 15, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 60 yards. Jeff Powell, touchdown, Big Orange.
Well, there were a lot of great plays in the game, as there are in any, but the one play I remember was, of course, the run by Jeff Powell, who was not that well known. He had played some, but I'll never forget that it was just perfect execution. That was a team play, Bill Anderson. That was a team play. And he just...
He had some speed, too.
He had the speed. He had the speed, but I mean, he had the blocking was there, everything, the execution was there. Dickey set it up right, and he was just, and that was it, 28-7, and that, what Miami fans were there, and they were mercilessly outnumbered. No question about it. That did it. That did it. And Miami, from that moment on, they were not in the game.
Powell just comes roaring down the greensward.
And again, screwy things that I remember. I remember and people were just so exhilarated that you just walk through this mass of people that are pounding and everything else. And we were on one of the top floors. I've forgotten how many floors there were, but I'll remember. I just wanted to get out of the crowd. They're great people. Just get out, and the escalator. Tennessee fans had destroyed the escalator, and it just was not even functioning. And just so to get on to the elevator, they weren't functioning. So we just threw, well, okay, we'll stay all night.
Bill, that's the stuff of which great stories are written. It has been a storybook year for the orange and white. There's no question, John. This has been the most unbelievable year, I believe, that I've been around.
For both Bill and I, doing Tennessee football is a hobby. Most people probably don't realize that, and that's fine, because we have other business interests that are basically our basic business, have been. It has been a very extraordinary experience for us. It is a very extraordinary experience for us because we get along well together. We have a lot of laughs. We have good people working with us that we haven't mentioned all of them, but people on our staff. And the main thing is the Tennessee fans. The Tennessee fans and their response makes us feel that maybe we are doing a little something to make life better for them. That's the way I feel, Bill.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think, you know, it's a good feeling to be out there and the fans respond. You know, you've got to feel pretty good about that. But that's what makes college football, and I'm just glad that I've been able to be a part of it, especially Tennessee, because that's, you know, that's my first love.
I'll say one thing. It does not seem like 25 years to me since that first. Do you?
Not at all. Not at all.
It's been a great run for John Ward and Bill Anderson here in the Vol Radio Network booth. They've been such a big part of Tennessee's football heritage over the past 24 years. We hope you've enjoyed a look back at some of their favorite games, and also thank you for being a part of the 25th anniversary of John Ward and Bill Anderson with the Vol Radio Network. Tennessee fans, of course, hope that John and Bill continue for many, many years to come, and John shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon.
That decision will be based on, first, health, and fortunately I'm in good health. Second, on whether I can devote, whether I can commit mentally to the time it takes to prepare for the game and enjoy doing it. Third, in listening to the tapes, which I do every game, if I feel that the concentration level that's required seems to be wavering, it won't take me any time to make that decision. Now, there will be no press conference. There will be no, he's going to, at the end of this year, at the end of the next year is going to be his last year. The final game, I'll just say to the listeners, because they're the most important part of it, that's it. I've enjoyed it. That's the way it's going to end. I don't know when that's going to happen.
This is a key play in this drive. I think he's probably trying to figure out what particular pass route might go best, but as officials motion for time to back into play, they're in the huddle and ready to go. Tennessee standing there, they're very slow coming out of the huddle. Crucial situation and down for Vanderbilt. Fisher under the center, and John's back, thank goodness.
Here's Fisher, the quarterback, 3rd and 5, sends a man in motion out this way. Fisher back to throw, is going to throw the long pass downfield. It's up for grabs. It is intercepted. Tennessee on a deflection. 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45, 40. Down he goes to the 38-yard line. All the way to the Vanderbilt.
Anderson was new to broadcasting. He knew nothing at all about broadcast, having been in insurance and football. And at the very first game we did, I think, was the Rice game in Dallas, not Dallas.
Fort Worth, I don't know where Rice is. I know it's
anyway, we were doing the Rice game. And the engineer, this was probably 20, 30 minutes before broadcast time, the engineer hollered down to Bill, said, say something to Bill so I can check your level of your mic. And Bill had heard John say, "Good night, Telco." That's a signal for the telephone company to unplug the network. Bill had heard John say that before, and he had no idea what it meant. And when the engineer asked for a voice level, Bill said, "Good night, Telco." Well, immediately the network was shut down. The telephone company took that as a signal to shut the network down. And here the network was shut down before the game ever started. Luckily, they got it back on in time.
He hits it well. It is Galt pulling it down at the 6. Galt, 10, 15, 20. Galt outside, 25. Galt 30. Galt 35. Galt 40. Galt 45, 50, 45, 40. Yes, sir. Willie Galt, ladies and gentlemen, is running all the way to the state capitol. Give him 6.
I guess the funniest story I can think about John Ward and working with him for 22 years goes back to 1985 when I had just brought a new man on board, Cleve Hayes. He was our head engineer. And unbeknownst to Cleve or myself, we had ordered these new microphone and headsets. They were Sennheisers. And we were right before the first game, and John put it on for a headset, and all of a sudden John said, "This will not work." He said, "I hear too much noise coming in from outside of the headset. It's just too much. I can't wear these." And with that, Cleve grabbed a thing of duct tape, which is, I don't know if you people are familiar with duct tape, but it's about 2 inches wide. It's this big gray heavy tape, and started wrapping the headset around John's ears, and just to keep the noise out. As we were doing this was probably with about 10 minutes to kick off. People in the other booths were starting to look over at John, and Cleve just kept rapping and rapping and rapping. I guess he probably went around his head 25 times just to keep the sound out of there. And it really was a funny thing. It worked. We did the broadcast, and probably the funniest thing was trying to get John out of there after the broadcast.
Back once again at Neyland Stadium. You didn't miss a thing except the beauty of the Pride of the Southland band playing. Tennessee's waiting for Auburn to come on. Auburn's waiting for Tennessee to come on. I hope somebody comes on. Bill, let's take a look at the defensive alignments for these two teams.
Where were we, John? I've got lost talking to Bibb here. I wasn't paying a bit attention to you.
Well, that's
sorry.
Neither are the listeners, really.
One of my favorite memories of Bill Anderson, we were on the air at halftime of the Notre Dame game in '91. Tennessee, of course, getting beat 31-14, and hadn't really slowed Notre Dame down at all in the first half. And so I turned to Bill. We were analyzing the first half, and I said, Bill, what's it going to take for Tennessee to get back and win this game? And Anderson, very deadpan, looked at me and said, about 60 points.
Long count. Streeter keeps upfield. 25. Breaks
there it is.
30. Turns on the gas. 35.
There it is.
40. Streeter 25.
Get the ball.
Streeter 50. Cuts back.
There it is.
And they go all the way. 45. 40. 35. 40. 25. 20. 15. 10. 5. Give him 6. Touchdown, Tennessee.
Can he play? What a run that was, John. He got some good blocking. He picked it up down the field, but he broke that line of scrimmage. He broke a tackle there. He pulled away from one fella, and then the orange wave started picking him up, and it was home sailing all the way.
From Silva, North Carolina, Jimmy Streeter goes 80 yards on a scrambling dash, and Tennessee leads California 6-3.
That was a long, long time ago. That's how much scientific knowledge John Ward and I both had. We were on the boat with some friends, and we decided we'd have beans, baked beans that day on the boat. We got the fire going, the charcoal grill, stuck the beans on top of the grill, and in about 10 minutes, we had one of the loudest explosions ever recorded on Fort Loudon Lake as those beans went all to smithereens. I've still got shrapnel shells on my leg.
Bill, people who are familiar with Washington State, and perhaps Tennessee fans aren't that familiar, Samoa, it's an unusual name. And it's also unusual that, as my good friend Bud Ford, Assistant Sports Information Director, said, he's amphibious. He can throw with either hand.
It's football time in Tennessee. Good afternoon, everybody. Tennessee and Vanderbilt playing at Nashville, Tennessee this afternoon. And working with me again today is the analyst on our Vol Network radio broadcast, Bill Anderson, who back in 1955 was the hero of the Tennessee-Vanderbilt game. Do you remember that one, Bill?
Very well, John, but that's been a long time ago.
You were slender and you were very sinewy in those days. Still very sinewy.
And slender.
Tell us a little bit about this.